in a split second, basically, as the chain broke, my cat continued to go backwards, and Dave's,
There are countless television shows built around mechanics, engines, and over-the-top custom vehicles. But Diesel Brothers always felt different. It wasn't just about horsepower or outrageous builds. The trucks on this show looked like they belonged in a post-apocalyptic world, towering, aggressive, and seemingly unstoppable. Every creation pushed the limits of what metal, money, and imagination could do. At the center of it all were two friends whose chemistry couldn't be faked. Dave Sparks, better known as Heavy D, and Diesel Dave Kiley. Their friendship wasn't built for television. It was built in grease, late nights, risky decisions, and years of trust. Fans saw the laughs, the pranks, and the massive trucks, but what they didn't see was how close Diesel Dave came to losing everything, including his life. This isn't just a story about machines. This is the heartbreaking tragedy of Diesel Dave, and how, for a terrifying moment, the world almost lost him. There was a second, just one, where Diesel Dave realized something was terribly wrong. The machine was moving faster than it should have been. The ground beneath him wasn't stable anymore, and as gravity took control, a single thought cut through his mind, louder than anything else. This might be it. For years, fans had no idea this moment ever happened. No news headlines, no dramatic TV episode, no social media breakdown. It was a secret carried quietly by the Diesel Brothers, buried under smiles and success. That changed when Heavy D finally spoke about it publicly. In a video shared years later, Heavy D said something that stunned fans everywhere. "I almost lost my best friend." Those words weren't said for drama. They were said because he meant them. So what happened? To understand how this tragedy unfolded, you first have to understand Heavy D. He's never been the kind of person who backs down from danger. If something looks impossible, that usually makes it more appealing to him. And one of his biggest obsessions, outside of diesel trucks, was snowcats. Snowcats are not toys. These are massive industrial machines used by ski resorts to groom mountain trails. They can weigh close to 20,000 pounds, stretch wider than most roads, and generate hundreds of horsepower. They're designed to climb mountains that would terrify even the most experienced drivers. Heavy D loved them because they represented raw power and control in the most unforgiving terrain imaginable. Heavy D also owned a cabin near Farmington Peak in Utah. During the warmer months, you could reach it by driving a rough mountain road. But winter changed everything. Snow swallowed the trail, visibility vanished, and the Forest Service officially shut the road down because it was simply too dangerous for regular travel. One section of that road was especially terrifying. On one side was a near-vertical rock wall rising hundreds of feet above. On the other side was a sheer drop that fell close to 1,000 feet into darkness. The road itself was barely wide enough for a vehicle under perfect conditions. In winter, it disappeared completely beneath massive snowdrifts, some piling up more than 10 or even 20 feet high. Most people would see that and turn around. Heavy D saw it as a challenge. Using his snowcats, he began carving paths through the snow so snowmobilers and skiers could safely reach the area. He had done it before. He knew the risks. And by January of 2018, it felt routine, at least to him. That winter, Heavy D invited Diesel Dave to join him on a trip to the cabin with their families. By then, Heavy D owned 2 snowcats, an older gray model and a newer red one he had recently purchased at auction. Heavy D had years of experience operating these machines. But for Diesel Dave, this was still new territory. He was confident, excited, and eager to learn, but he didn't yet have the instincts that only time and dangerous terrain can build. On January 27, 2018, the group loaded up. Families, kids, supplies, Everyone climbed into the snowcats and began the journey up the mountain. Against the odds, the trip went smoothly. They reached the cabin, settled in, and spent the night without incident. The next morning, however, brought a decision that would change everything. They decided to clear the most dangerous stretch of the road, the cliffside section that winter had buried under deep, unstable snow. Heavy D climbed into the red snowcat, along with Diesel Dave and his 7-year-old daughter, Charlie. The older gray snowcat stayed behind. At first, everything seemed normal. The massive blade at the front of the red snowcat cut into the drift, pushing snow aside and slowly revealing the buried road beneath. The machine moved forward with confidence. For a moment, it felt like just another successful run. Then the mountain shifted. Without warning, the snowpack above the road gave way. The drift collapsed under its own weight, and the snowcat lurched sideways. In seconds, the machine slid toward the edge. When it finally stopped, the red snowcat was hanging over open air, balanced between solid ground and a 1,000-foot drop. No one inside dared to move. Any shift in weight could have sent them over the edge. The engine hummed, the wind howled, and for a long, terrifying moment, time seemed frozen. Heavy D knew they couldn't stay there. Eventually, they shut the machine off and made the decision to get out. They climbed down carefully and began the slow hike back to the cabin through waist-deep snow. Diesel Dave ran ahead to get help as quickly as possible, while Heavy D stayed behind with his daughter, making noise in the darkness to scare off wildlife. When Diesel Dave reached the cabin, the situation got worse. The gray snowcat, their only chance at rescue, had a dead battery. Panic set in, but they managed to get it started. They left the kids behind, climbed back in, and headed out into the cold night to save the red snowcat before gravity finished the job. When they returned, the red snowcat was still hanging there, frozen in the same deadly position. They came up with a plan. Attach a heavy chain between the two snowcats. The gray one would act as an anchor, while they slowly pulled the red one back onto the trail. For a moment, it worked. The chain tightened. The gray snowcat dug into the snow. The red machine crept backward, inch by inch, away from the edge. Hope surged through them. Then came the sound no one ever wants to hear. The chain snapped. In an instant, the red snowcat jolted violently, twisted sideways, and began sliding off the mountain, with Diesel Dave still inside. Heavy D could do nothing but watch. The massive machine spun as it disappeared into the darkness. The headlights faced him for a split second, then vanished over the edge. In that moment, Heavy D was certain he had just watched his best friend die. He dropped to his knees, screaming into the night, begging for a miracle. And then he had a choice to make. As the echoes of the crash faded into silence, Heavy D stood frozen. The mountain felt impossibly large. The darkness below swallowed everything. His mind raced with one terrifying question. Do I climb down, or do I drive? Climbing down the cliff on foot meant risking his own life. One wrong step, one hidden patch of ice, and he could fall the same way Diesel Dave had. But driving the gray snowcat all the way around the mountain would take time Diesel Dave might not have. In that moment of panic and heartbreak, Heavy D later said he felt a clear, overwhelming instinct telling him not to climb. Something told him to drive instead. He trusted that feeling, climbed into the gray snowcat, and began racing toward the bottom of the mountain. Meanwhile, Diesel Dave was experiencing what should have been the final moments of his life. Inside the red snowcat, everything happened in chaos. The machine flipped and tumbled violently as it slid down the mountain. Normally, not wearing a seatbelt is one of the most dangerous mistakes a driver can make. But in this rare, unbelievable case, it saved his life. As the snowcat rolled, the windshield burst free. Diesel Dave was thrown clear of the machine and launched into the deep snow beside it. Instead of being crushed under 20,000 pounds of steel, he was ejected into soft powder, tumbling uncontrollably down the slope. He rolled until the mountain finally let him stop. Diesel Dave came to rest buried waist-deep in snow, battered, disoriented, and in pain, but alive. He had no idea how far he'd fallen, or how badly he was hurt. All he knew was that he couldn't see the snowcat anymore, and the silence around him was terrifying. Back above, Heavy D pushed the gray snowcat as hard as he dared. Every second felt like an eternity. His thoughts spiraled between hope and dread. He imagined the worst. He prepared himself for what he might find at the bottom. When he finally reached the area where the red snowcat had fallen, he searched desperately. Then he heard it. A voice. Against all odds, Diesel Dave was calling out. Heavy D rushed toward the sound and found his best friend buried in the snow, injured but breathing. The relief was overwhelming. The impossible had happened. Diesel Dave had survived a fall that should have been fatal. Emergency help was called, and Diesel Dave was eventually transported for medical treatment. His injuries were serious, but he was alive, and that was all that mattered. The aftermath of the accident changed everything. Physically, Diesel Dave needed time to recover. Emotionally, the weight of how close he came to dying stayed with him. For Heavy D, the trauma of watching his best friend disappear over a cliff never fully faded. It was a reminder that no amount of experience, confidence, or power can control nature. For years, the story stayed mostly private. Fans continued to watch Diesel Brothers, unaware of the tragedy that had nearly ended it all. When Heavy D finally shared the story publicly, it wasn't for views or attention, it was to remind people how fragile life really is. Today, Diesel Dave's survival stands as one of the most unbelievable moments in off-road history. A chain snapping, a windshield breaking loose, a man being thrown clear at exactly the right moment. Every detail had to line up perfectly for him to live. 1 second later, or earlier, and the outcome would have been very different. The Diesel Brothers are still known for massive trucks, wild builds, and bold personalities. But behind the entertainment is a story of friendship, faith, and survival that changed them forever. This wasn't just a close call. It was a moment that rewrote lives. And it's a tragedy that reminds us how quickly everything can be taken away.